Good Sunday evening. I'm meteorologist Nicholas Herboso in the Fox 10 Gulf Stream Center with an update on the tropics. Lots of questions being asked about this tropical disturbance that is developing in the Caribbean, likely to move into the Gulf of Mexico and bring impacts to the northern and possibly eastern Gulf Coast. We're going to have all the details you need to know. This is going to be a rather in-depth breakdown. I've got some time here, and I have got the questions pulled up. Already seeing some questions, Northwest Florida, already seeing the questions come in. We're going to address as many as we can. I've got some things to go over, so hopefully I address some of them as we go, but then I'll keep an eye out and we'll go from there. We are also live on Facebook and YouTube. So if you're watching on our Fox 10 Gulf stream right now, also highly recommend that you check us out on Facebook because there I can see the comments. I'm also going to be keeping an eye out on the live on YouTube as well. So plenty of things to talk about, and we're just going to start breaking it down right now. I'm getting all the whatabouts. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. Let's get right to it. So here we go. There is an area of disturbed weather that is developing right now in the Western Caribbean. You can actually see the thunderstorms there on the satellite picture. We've seen a big time blow up of showers and thunderstorms compared to what it was just a day ago. So this thing is definitely beginning to get its act together, already seeing some lowering pressures, and we're expecting this thing to develop further as it moves off to the north and west. You can see the development chance here is high over the next 7 days, 80%. We are expecting this thing to become a tropical system, or be a tropical storm, tropical depression, or more. We'll talk about that as we go on here. Now, I want to give some key points as we start this thing off here. We are still in the developing stages with this system, so we've still got some time to go. However, the forecast models have been moving this thing rather quickly, and it is possible that impacts to the Gulf Coast will come as soon as Thursday, late Wednesday into Thursday, with some of the faster forecast models. We'll take a look at those forecast models in a second. Tropical system is expected to form. We're almost certain that we're going to get a tropical system out of this one, possibly even a hurricane. So we recommend that all across the Gulf Coast you review your hurricane plan and make sure that you have it in place just in case something does happen. Let's break down overall what's happening. I'm keeping an eye on the comments as well, and we'll break down the kind of location by location impacts in a second. But I want to mention what's going on right now. Finally, we have had the development of this low pressure system starting to kind of consolidate and get its act together. There was a big, deep, and if you were watching Fox 10 News over the past few days, I pointed this out, a huge, deep trough that dipped all the way into the Caribbean. That was the Kickstarter for this low pressure system. You might have also heard us refer to it as the Central American gyre. It's a fancy term. It's essentially a broad area of low pressure like we're seeing right now. So I know it's a crazy term, and I saw some comments about it like, we're calling that tropical storms now. It's a crazy term, I know, but essentially it's a large area of low pressure, and we're going to see something consolidate out of this thing. So that's what we're watching there. Here's the map that you're probably going to want to see. Here's some of the key points on what we need to know. System is organizing a track towards the Big Bend of Florida or the Panhandle. Right now, based on the forecast models, seems most likely. And those impacts would arrive late in the week, especially on Thursday. A lot of the forecast models are leaning towards that. So Big Bend region, where is that? Of course, so if you look on the map here, we're right here in Mobile. There's your Panhandle, there's your Big Bend, there's your peninsula. So we've got a range of options here where this thing could go based on the steering currents. Zoom in and take a look at this. This is not an official track. This is our forecast. This is hand-drawn by meteorologists here. We have been looking over and over at these forecast models, at the ensembles, at everything, at the steering flow, at what the storm is doing right now, trying to fine-tune a forecast for y'all to see. And this is what we're going with right now. You can kind of see what we're thinking, where this thing will go. Definitely Big Bend, places like Cedar Key, Apalachicola, Perry, Florida, Tallahassee's in there, Panama City Beach, Navarre Beach, Pensacola, and even Southwest Alabama is included in this. This is not a forecast track once again, but this is kind of the range of options here, and we'll look at some of the forecast models in a second. But that is the idea. Understand that Mobile area was within the range of options for potential impacts. So we have to keep an eye on this thing. Not saying it's going to be terrible here. We don't really understand the impacts yet because it's a little too far out, but we understand that the possibility is there. So you can see the focus area that has developed, and if you've been watching us over the past few days, you notice how this thing has been slowly shrinking. We've been shrinking our focus area. I want you to understand that there is still some uncertainty in the forecast models, so this focus area might shift just a little bit over the next couple of days. That's why we asked for you to pay attention over the next couple of days. You don't have to look at every single model run. That's our job. But we want you to pay attention to whenever we put out notifications or stuff saying, hey, the thinking has shifted or something. We want you to be aware of that. I want to break down the key players right now that are steering this system. The forecast models over the past day have started to solidify, has started to get a better idea of what these steering features will do. We are now confident that we will have some kind of upper level low pressure system. This is a dip in the jet stream. And this dip in the jet stream will actually break off a low pressure system. You might have heard about us talking about the front that's over the central United States right now. This is also associated with the cold front, and I've seen some comments that also address that, asking about the cold front. So I'm glad that some of you have paid attention and noticed that there is a cold front that might be steering this thing. And this is one of the key factors. The exact position of this central or this upper level low will dictate how much this thing turns. It could turn sharply into the Big Bend, like some forecast models are indicating. It could go more in towards the Panhandle. There's also this blocking upper level ridge, a ridge of high pressure. It's actually over us right now. It's sliding off to the east. That's why we've had such quiet and calm weather over the past little bit. But now that this thing is going to be shifting off to the east, it is going to be a factor in the steering of this disturbance. Could be guiding it more towards the central Gulf Coast, or if it is weaker, it might allow it to press more towards the Big Bend. I'm going to get a couple questions here. Did I hear cold front? Yeah, I know. We all want that. Trust me, we all do. I hope your first day of fall was nice and toasty like everybody else's. So Cameron, landfall in Alabama. Right now, that is technically still on the table. Technically. But the likelihood still seems to be the Panhandle in the Big Bend. Looking at some of the other comments here. Okaloosa County. I got you, Tammy. We're going to talk about Okaloosa County. What can we expect here in Gulf Shores? We'll talk about that in a second. Yes, we're going to get more information when this thing is developed into a tropical storm. So y'all are getting the idea. Let's go ahead and kind of keep moving here. This is a map that you might want to pay attention to, so I'm actually going to take it full screen so y'all can see this. So there's the steering currents, right? Well, now I'm going to zoom in, and this is a new map that we made today. And this is the area of most likely impacts. In that light red color, that area you can see the Big Bend, Panhandle, the far eastern half of our area, the far eastern parts of our area, we're talking Santa Rosa, Okaloosa County, that's on the border of this. Now, will this focus area, will this impacts area shift? My goodness, yes it will. We are still a couple days out, so we are expecting this thing to shift around a little bit. But we wanted to give you a first idea, a first thought based on what we have seen in the forecast models on what we could expect. The exact details of the impacts can't be determined at this point. We are extremely, the forecast is a bit uncertain when it comes to intensity and exact track. And intensity and exact track will mean a lot for final impacts. That's why we have kind of a broader zone. You see the blue area, it's a wider area. We recommend people in this area, this includes Mobile, Baldwin County, all of our Mississippi counties, all the way down to portions of Louisiana. We really want to pay attention to this system. We may not be right now, as of the latest forecast models, in the impact zone, but it is possible that we could see some shifts. So we want to pay attention. And a lot of y'all, if you're watching this right now, you are doing that. And that is a good thing to see. Let's see. Leave Friday morning. Felicia, I want to address this comment. This is an interesting comment. Let me get it back here. Birthday trip to Universal. Supposed to leave Friday morning. Let me go ahead and get to the timeline here. Let me go ahead and tell you what's going on. In the next little bit, I'm going to have a new discussion out on fox10tv.com. We spent a lot of time writing these out. I mean, you can see my notes here. I have extensive notes that we have taken on this. And I want to run through real quick. I don't have the graphic for this made, but I want to run through the hurricane timeline, if you will, the impacts timeline for this system, so you can kind of get an idea. The clear idea is that now through Tuesday, we have a developing system that is moving into or approaching the Gulf of Mexico. Wednesday into early Thursday, the storm is in the Gulf of Mexico and strengthening. I'll say that again. Wednesday and early Thursday, the storm is in the Gulf of Mexico and likely strengthening. Again, the details, we have to wait a little bit. Thursday into Friday, we could begin to see impacts, especially in the Big Bend region. The main window for impacts is that Thursday into Friday. I will mention that a lot of the recent forecast model runs have leaned more towards Thursday, things clearing out by Friday. So taking a look, if you're trying to take a trip down to Orlando on Friday, it might be rough going based on where the impacts are at that moment as the storm is moving inland. Most forecast models have the storm moving inland at that point. So that time frame is something that you're going to want to keep an eye on. I would say wait another day or two, check back and see what the timing shakes out to be, because we still will get more details as we go through. So that was a quick update on timing, and I'll go back over that again. I do want to look at some forecast models here. Let's see here. I want to look at anything. A lot of people talking about the games for Saturday. Of course, I know South has a big game. Alabama, of course, has a massive game. And we'll be paying attention to this. So, GEFS ensembles show east of Pensacola. I'm actually going to show those in a second. So let me go to the forecast models. Y'all are pushing me along here, so let's go ahead. This is an interesting one, and I'll zoom into this one so you can see it. This is a comparison of the GFS and the European model. If you've been watching us on Fox 10 News, you'll notice that I've somewhat refrained from showing the forecast models over the past couple of days just because they've been a little too wild. Now that I'm starting to see some consistency and more comfortable in showing them, and here's what we're seeing. And remember, you can always check the forecast models out online. There are many resources that I'll point out in a second. But you see that little bullseye over the Gulf. That is our storm here. And in the colors, I have the upper level pattern outlined. And I mentioned one of those key factors being that upper level low. Look at the agreement here. That little yellow circle, that is where the upper level low is. Look at the agreement between the European and the GFS. That is what we want to see. Now, there are some small details. There are some small details that differ here, but it's still kind of pointing us in the direction of this thing is going towards kind of Panhandle Big Bend based on the position of that low there. You take a look at the position of the ridge. That is the big orange area. That is the ridge of high pressure. Notice on the GFS, it is slightly weaker in this model run. On the European, it is slightly stronger. A slightly stronger ridge would push it closer towards the Fox 10 viewing area. Let's actually look at the forecast models here. So this is the upper level pattern in colors and the storm in the black circle. So here's the storm right here. We're at Wednesday. There's our upper level low. There's our ridge of high pressure. Based on this forecast model, we can see that there is an opening right around Apalachicola, the Big Bend. And as this high pressure continues to retreat off to the east, that is the general path that it ends up taking. Let's go to the European forecast model. Similar story here. Notice the ridge of high pressure moves off to the east, that orange ball. There it is there. And then on Wednesday, we have our upper level low diving down. It is a similar story. Even though the ridge is slightly stronger here, it still looks like a path towards the Panhandle approaching the Big Bend. Now at this point, I want to kind of switch gears here. I'm going to go to our browser, and we're going to take a look at some of the forecast models right from the source. If you've ever seen us use Tropical Tidbits, this is actually what we use to forecast. We look at a lot of the forecast models here. It is a great resource to look at. And we're going to go over some of that in a second here. Let me set up one other small thing. Give me one moment here. There we go. All right, so I want to take a look at some of the stuff that's going on, and I'm going to start with the upper level pattern once again in the forecast models. We're looking at the GFS and European forecast model. I want to compare what the model trend has been for the shape of this upper level low pressure system. So let's run this thing out. You see that red ball over us? You see that red ball over us right here, and I'll draw it out. That red ball that's right there. That is the ridge of high pressure. What this ridge of high pressure is going to do is slide off to the east. And as it does that, it will open the window for this system to move north. And there you can see it coming up at the bottom of the screen here. So there's the system coming up, and then you have this big trough, this big dip in the jet stream that is right here. This is a closed upper low. This is also associated, some of you might have seen, with a cold front that'll be near our area. So what this does is actually picks up the system. So it starts to feel a tug to its north. So it will pick up the system, and as this low pressure system dives more to the south, if it continues to dive to the south, it will push the system more towards the northeast. That is why we have been honing in on a landfall location somewhere around the Big Bend or Panhandle of Florida. Understand, though, that any shift in the position of this upper level low would shift the position of the landfall area. So something we're going to have to pay attention to in the coming days. Let's compare this picture. This is hour 72, 1 p.m. on the 25th. Let's compare this to the European. You see the big ball, the big ridge of high pressure moving off to the east. You see our low pressure system, our trough, developing over here. Watch how it comes into the picture. Watch how it comes into the picture once we get to the 25th. And there it is. And this one has it pretty strong here, and that has the opening for the storm to move off to the north here. Oop. Don't want to draw a sounding. But you can see where the general thinking is. Now this opens the door for this thing to move up towards the Big Bend. So that's the upper level pattern to explain some of that. Now let's move on to something different. Let's move on to the upper level pattern in terms of wind shear. So throughout this whole entire conversation I've been talking about, we have a general idea of where this thing will go. Panhandle, Big Bend. What about the intensity? A lot of questions there. Well, one of the things that we can look at is, of course, the water temperatures. Those are very warm. Also, we can look at the wind shear and the upper level setup of the winds that are in the atmosphere. So take a look at this. This is the GFS forecast model. We are looking way up in the top of the atmosphere. And you will see our storm come into picture, that little L right down here. There it is. There's our storm. Notice that we have this dip in the jet stream and this cutoff low that is right here. You see, and I'm going to highlight this so you can see this. You see where I'm drawing this out. That is our dip in the jet stream. As our system moves north, it will start to feel some of the stronger upper level winds associated with the jet stream. However, if the storm is stronger, then it will be more resilient to that. I also want to draw your attention, so we're looking 1 p.m. on the 25th here. Notice how over the storm at this moment, as it enters the Gulf of Mexico, you see these lines moving away from the storm. That is setting up what's called an upper level anticyclone, essentially a ventilation system for the storm to allow it to strengthen. So there is the possibility, based on the environment and the wind shear, that this thing will strengthen as it's in the Gulf of Mexico. Then maybe as it gets closer to land, towards the end of the week, it starts to feel just a little bit of some wind shear. Let's take a look at a different forecast model. This is the European forecast model. And it has a very similar story. You see the low, that little L coming up. Then you see those brighter colors. The brighter colors indicates the dip in the jet stream and the wind shear. However, in this one, you can kind of see it still keeps its outflow. See the arrows moving away from the L? That would be the upper level anticyclone that is ventilating the system, as I mentioned. So it would still have room to strengthen in this case, and that jet will pick it up. So There's still some questions about how much the wind shear from the jet itself will hurt or help the system. But right now, based on what we can see there, it looks like that we could have a hurricane in the Gulf of Mexico, because especially as it is entering the Gulf of Mexico, as we saw in the forecast models there, as it is entering the Gulf of Mexico, it is in a regime of much lighter wind shear. Also, let's take a look at some of the sea surface temperatures, and I'll pull these up here behind me, and I'll take it full for you to see. Here are the sea surface temperatures in the region. They're warm, yes, 85 degrees where the storm is going into the Yucatan channel here, and then just off of Florida, 84 degrees. I'll zoom in and take a closer look. These are some of the warmer ocean temperatures right now in the Atlantic Basin and really in the world. So very warm ocean waters. Of course, warm ocean waters will help in strengthening. That is not all to strengthening, but it will help with strengthening. So that is definitely a possibility. Also, it seems that the warm water above 80 degrees is rather deep. So even if the system churns up the water a bit, it will still have some water to work with. You can see all that red there. So all of that to say that this has the possibility of becoming a hurricane as it gets into the Gulf of Mexico. I just kind of wanted to show you some of the reasoning behind that there. All right, moving on here, I want to review really quickly some of the main points that we were talking about. Then we'll address some questions here. So as we mentioned, this system is organizing, is going to become a tropical storm most likely. Next name is Helene, and could become a hurricane as it moves into the Gulf of Mexico. It moved in the Gulf of Mexico right around Wednesday. Most of the steering right now indicates that this system would track towards the peninsula or the Big Bend of Florida. You can see that there. Potential impacts would come late in the week. The exact details of the impacts are still slightly uncertain, but as we talked about here, we talked about this thing possibly being a hurricane, something that we'll have to watch there. That would bring more significant impacts. This thing has an environment around it that could be somewhat favorable, and some of the forecast models have been slightly aggressive in what they're showing. Over the next few days, you're going to see a lot of different versions of forecast models that show different solutions. Until we get a defined low-level center, and until we get the hurricane hunters in there tomorrow to gather some information, the forecast models are still going to be a little flippy-floppy. So you're going to have to be aware of that. Be aware of what you see on social media. If you're seeing an individual forecast model one that shows a Category 4 hurricane going to who knows where, beware that that's only one forecast model run. There are a lot more to look at. So I mentioned that we worked on this forecast, and a lot of people asking in the comments about location here. Let's look at some of the ensemble forecasts here. So we actually have the new ones in now. This is from the 18Z run, which is the most recent run of the GFS ensembles here. And here you can see all these little spaghetti plots that show potential tracks for the storm. And I'm monitoring the comments here, so if you have any questions about this, let me know. I'll zoom in slightly. I want to point a couple things out for you here. Number one, notice how they all start from a different place. Why is that? That is because we do not have a defined center of circulation. Because we don't have a defined center of circulation, we can't start these in the exact same spots. So there's a little uncertainty, a little width here in the possible solutions. However, you can tell, remember all these factors I talk about with the steering flow, this upper level low that's going to be spinning up here. You can kind of see how it picks up and steers the system into the Panhandle or the Big Bend. This latest run of these ensembles leans more towards the Panhandle. However, other runs lean more towards the Big Bend. Here's the European forecast models, and you can see it here. This one has a slightly stronger low, so you get a little bit more push, and they push more towards the Big Bend. So what are we saying here? Question, let's see. That big center line, let me address what the big center line is. It's a good question. This is the consensus of the ensembles. So this big black center line is the consensus of the forecast models. Understand, because we don't have a defined center of circulation, this consensus line is going to flop around over the next little bit. I just wanted to give you an idea of the possibilities. So we looked at all of these forecast models. We looked at all of these forecast models over the past few runs, all of their shifts, and said, okay, what is the most likely scenario? Where is the most likely impact going to be? And that is where we got this graphic that's behind me and right beside me. That is where we got this graphic showing the Panhandle and the Big Bend. So what do you need to think about over the next few days? Well, we need to continue to watch the forecast. If you are in the Panhandle or the Big Bend of Florida, especially towards the end of the week, you need to be preparing for possible impacts, or at least be aware that possible impacts could be coming your way. More details will be coming in the future. When I say the future, I mean the next day or so. So we want you to pay close attention to the forecast. Guys, keep asking your comments so I can see. I want to try to answer some of these here. In-depth details for Santa Rosa. Let me talk about our Santa Rosa, Okaloosa, Escambia County. Let me talk a little bit about that. You're within the range of possibilities for potential track coming towards you. You can see that there, and that's the kind of idea with this forecast graphic, trying to communicate some of that. However, it is not a guarantee. These are forecast models. These are going to shift around left and right, and y'all know this. Y'all have seen how this works. So we want you, if you're in the Panhandle, to pay attention. If we want you, if you're in the Panhandle, to have your hurricane kit ready to go. It's better to be prepared. If you're prepared, you don't have to be worried about anything. So it's better to be prepared. So have that plan in place, watch the forecast models, and let's wait and see. Let's wait and see. If we go through the next few days, Matt and Jen will be in. They'll be updating you left and right, and I'll be updating you from home as well. We're going to be all hands on deck here to give you the update, so we can actually say, okay, do we need to actually take the action and make the preparations? Again, this is hurricane season. It is a long, long, long process in watching these storms. It is a very long process. So there's going to be a lot of speculation, a lot of waiting. And that's just something we have to deal with. And I'll be honest, guys, this has been a fortunate thing. I'll address Mobile in a second. This has been a fortunate thing that we've been able to give you the heads up so early on this. Typically, we don't. Think back to Francine. We were like on the fence for quite a while. We have stronger steering currents here, so we're a little bit more confident. We've been able to dive in a little bit more into the forecast and give you a better idea of what's going on. We're happy that we've been able to do that. Yes, is it still windshield wipery? Yes, is it not confident? Yes, are there still uncertainties? Big time uncertainties. But we're able to give you some general idea, and I'm glad we're able to do that. Looks like Tallahassee, Florida. That is a definite possibility. Mobile. So let's talk about Mobile impacts, and I think this is a good point. And even this applies to the Panhandle too. Let's think about a tropical system real quick. As a tropical system, and I'll just draw it on this, as a tropical system moves in, and let's say it does take that Apalachicola track. The east side of the storm has most of the impacts. You know that. The saying, the east is the beast. That side of the storm has the most impacts. On the western side of the storm, it is typically called the drier side of the storm. It is the offshore flow side of the storm. So that means that the wind will be flowing offshore, so we wouldn't have to deal with surge. We would still have rain, yes, still have clouds, but it would not be as much as it is on the eastern side. Why is that? Well, think about that. The eastern side is pulling up moisture from the Caribbean, from the Gulf of Mexico, from everywhere. So there's a lot of moisture piling into that side. That side ends up being stronger. Also, that is the onshore side. Most of the forecast models have us on the western side. So that would mean more dampened down impact. It'll be lesser impact. However, that being said, if the storm moves closer to us, that impact dial turns up just a little bit. So that's why we still have to wait and see. But to give you some perspective, and a lot of us know this if we live down here on the Gulf Coast, the west side is the better side to be on the storm. That is good news for places like Mobile. If this thing ends up going to a place like Panama City, Mobile, it'll be a cloudy and breezy day with a few showers around. If it ends up going to Apalachicola, it might even see some sunshine at some point. If it ends up to the Big Bend, yeah, we'll probably be seeing some sunshine and a northerly wind at that point. So you can kind of get the idea. It's a range of possibilities right now. I can't get too much into the specifics because we're still a couple days out from the really confident forecast, but hopefully that can help and you can get that idea. Any other questions? Keep it coming. Oh, and let me take a look at the YouTube comments as well here. YouTube comments. Let me make sure those are going here. And in Facebook, keep asking the questions here. West side is best, definitely. So if it goes to any part of Florida, would there be any impacts for Mobile? Kelly, this is a good question. If it goes to any part of Florida, will there be any impacts for Mobile? We would be on the western side. It'd be the drier side. Our wind would be from the north. It would be offshore. The thing that will matter is how big is this storm once it starts approaching? And also how big is the wind field? How many clouds are on that western side? Well, that would dictate, do we see rain? Do we see stronger winds there? We will probably have breezy conditions. Even if this thing made landfall in Panama City, it'll have breezy conditions. We'll have clouds and maybe some showers in Mobile, talking about Mobile, if this thing were to make landfall in Panama City. But that's not, we can't determine all the details just yet because we don't know everything. Just to give you an idea, the closer it is in Florida, the closer it is in the Panhandle, the further west it is landfall in the Panhandle, the more impacts a place like Mobile would see. More impacts a place like Pascagoula, Leetsville, Lucedale would see in terms of clouds and rain as well. So even you're on the western side, you will see some impacts, but they will be more minimal compared to the eastern side. I hope that answers your question. I know that was a long-winded answer. Do meteorologists come up with their own forecast when they vacation, or do they watch a local meteorologist? We often watch our friends because we know meteorologists all across the country. So we'll watch our friends, but we'll check the forecast too. We'll check the forecast models. Where do the Euro and GFS have it going, Taylor? I showed those forecast models earlier. They're kind of going towards the same area where it's mostly towards the Big Bend, some of them leaning towards the Panhandle. If you look at the ensemble approach, which is probably a better thing to do at this time, I showed those a second ago, the ensemble approach, I'll show it again, has the European ensembles more towards the Big Bend, place like Apalachicola, and the GFS ensembles at this latest run have them moving slightly closer towards the Panhandle itself, places like Santa Rosa, Okaloosa County. So that would be something we'd have to watch very closely. We cannot rule that possibility out, but again, there is a range of possibilities. That is why we always come back to the broader picture. That is why we always come back to this wider fan here, this wider impacts area that we drew out. Hand drew this thing because we're like, okay, let's look at where this thing is. And I actually wrote down a few locations in my notes when I was going over this. I was thinking anywhere from Pascagoula, Mississippi to Tampa, Florida for like the kind of impact zone. And I was able to narrow it slightly, Pensacola, Florida to Clearwater, Florida. And over the next few days, these kind of end zones of where the impacts, the possible track will go, will start to narrow. Also, I want to mention that when this thing becomes a potential tropical cyclone and starts to get advisories, or when it becomes a tropical cyclone, meaning a depression or a storm, or a hurricane, depression or storm, though that's the definition of tropical cyclone, we will actually get an actual track. And you can actually see where this thing is going according to the National Hurricane Center. That will be very beneficial. Margin of error. Let's see. Especially without an official cone, what is the margin of error this many days out from landfall? Not sure how Mobile could be considered okay or not okay at this point. I can't consider Mobile okay or not okay at this point. There is still quite a bit of wiggle room. I mentioned the landfall locations points earlier, the kind of two end zones that I was talking about. That's within reasonable bounds. So that's kind of my wider margin. I'm talking Fort Myers would be my widest margin there, as you can see included. New Orleans, Morgan City would be my wider margin there. However, we have to take this with a grain of salt and understand that because we don't have a center of circulation, there is some shift. So these early forecasts, we're trying our best to give you an early forecast, but there is wiggle room. There is a margin of error. I can't put a miles number on it. But definitely something that will swing a little bit. I hope that answers your question. Jacksonville, Lake City on the east side or the west side. It depends on the track. If the track goes all the way to Tampa, you end up on the northern and western side. If the track goes to Apalachicola, you're on the eastern side. It would be very wet, it'd be very windy, but the exact details of how impactful the impacts are will be based on the intensity. We need to figure that out later. Camping on a pop-up camper I can't read. Camping on a pop-up camper this week in Destin. The weekend, let me address the weekend. A lot of the forecast models have this thing moving inland at that point. So things will be calming down all across the Gulf Coast at that point. There is the possibility that this thing moves slower. In fact, I think the German model had this thing approaching more towards Saturday, early Saturday. So that is still a possibility. I'd recommend waiting and checking the forecast. Let's get a little bit more definition in it, and then you can make your decision there. We'll have more updates for you. Chance for an easterly swing. I mean, it's there. Always a possibility. Thoughts on Jacksonville, Florida? Rain either way, I think, because either way you're on the eastern side. Exact impacts to be determined. Let's see. Show the models again, but through Friday. Let me see here. I'm going to show this plot. Let's show this one. I'm going to show this plot, and I'll point out, once we get towards Friday, this is the area that we're looking at. And it'll be continuing to move inland. And these little lines, let me clarify here, these little lines are where the center of circulation would be at that point. So it'll be moving inland. Maybe some slower models have it a little closer to inland. That's a rough guess, but just to give you an idea. Which is more accurate, the GFS or the European? I'm going to come on camera for this one. They fight it out. I often answer that question with, it depends. The GFS has done a good job this year. The European AI model, which some of y'all might have heard of, has done a decent job this year. The European hasn't been bad, though, which sometimes a little slow to catch onto the train. But we use all of them. We use all of them equally. And look at the trends. It's not which one model is better. We have to take an ensemble approach. We have to take a wider approach. We have to look at many different options here. So it's not which one model is best. It's kind of hard to answer that question. Let me keep going here. Fort Myers, keep an eye on it. Mike, these questions kill me. The storm hasn't even formed yet. It's an educated guess. An educated guess, yeah. I mean, it's educated for sure. It is based on details. It's based on the forecast that we're looking at. And you're right, the center of the storm has not formed yet. Therefore, there is that wiggle room, as I was talking about. There is that wiggle room of, could it be on the western side of guidance, could be on the eastern side of guidance. So just giving some rough ideas, trying to answer some of these questions. Thoughts on Pensacola? We just need to keep an eye on it. Timing, once again, it looks like mostly Thursday into early Friday. When is it expected to show formation? It looks like within the next day or so. In fact, I wish I had it pulled up. I can pull it up. Formation chances 50% over the next 2 days, 80% over the next 7 days. All that to say, it's going to be developing probably within the next couple of days. What are some good hurricane preparations? That's a good point to talk about. Just your general things. Make sure you have a hurricane kit. A hurricane kit would include your non-perishables, just a supply of them to last you for a while. Your batteries, your flashlights. If you have a generator, that's a good idea. If you don't have a generator, highly recommend it. I highly recommend it. I'm speaking from experience on that one with Hurricane Sally. We learned our lesson not having a generator there for a period of time. Let's see. Also, just other things that you can think about. Have your bottled water with you. You want to essentially be able to live without power for a little while, or have a way to get power. That's kind of the main thing with the hurricane kit. Also, I recommend that you check out your yard. Make sure that if you have any trees that you don't like, that might cause issues, you get those addressed, and just kind of keep that in mind. You have some time to do that as well here. All right, guys. Well, it is 8:25, and the comments are slowing down. Thank you so much for joining us. I was hoping I was able to address some of these questions. Charleston, South Carolina. That's a long way down. we'd have to wait and see. It would have to take the far eastern side of guidance. Keeping an eye on the comments. All right, guys, I think I'm going to be wrapping this one up. Georgia, need to keep an eye on this as well. So essentially, to wrap this up, everybody from Alabama, Georgia, and Florida needs to keep an eye on this thing. However, it does look like, and I'll pull this map up one more time, the main impact zone based on the current guidance at this time, is, and I'll zoom right into it, mostly in the Panhandle and the Big Bend. Could that shift? Yes, and we'll be keeping our eyes on it, of course. Thank you so much for joining us, guys. We'll have more discussions. I will have the full detailed discussion posted very soon, very shortly, on fox10tv.com. I want to answer this question: is New Orleans in the clear? Keep watching. See what that map says. Keep watching. We'll just keep an eye on things for sure. It does look like most of the impacts based on the current forecast models are the Big Bend and Peninsula. Thank y'all so much for watching, and we'll be keeping you updated all the way through the week. Again, don't panic. Stay calm. Keep an eye on the forecast. We deal with these things all the time. There's no reason to be worried. There's no reason to be worked up about it. We deal with hurricanes. That is a fact of life of living on the Gulf Coast. And if you have a hurricane kit and you're prepared, you will be good to go, and just as long as you're paying attention. And make sure you follow some trusted sources as well. So thank you so much, guys. We're in the Gulfstream Center. We're preparing for the news at 9 o'clock on Fox 10 News. Follow our social media accounts as well if you want. We have regular information that's going to be popping up there, discussions, and much, much more. We thank you so much for joining us, guys. Again, thank you for joining us, and make sure you stay safe and pay attention to the forecast.